Hi everyone, welcome back to ITOM batch 3 day 34. How are you doing guys today?
Good
Okay,
idea.
how are you?
I'm also thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned or as you know we are doing every day. Before proceeding to the next things, any questions to the covered sessions now in event management? Okay, if there is no questions, I think let's get proceed. Let me share my screen. Let me know once my screen is visible to you guys.
It is.
Okay. Sorry. So today we are going to be discuss about push or pull connectors and how or what configurations we need to do for to configure the SNMP listeners or mid server extension and other things basically. Right. So as I mentioned, there are two type of connectors available in ServiceNow. One is pull and one is push. Right. So in simple word, the naming convention is also denoting the same thing as well. Pull means we are trying to pull the data from the target machine or the target instance or the target monitoring source tool. And push is something where we are providing our ServiceNow instance detail and the target machine or again target monitoring system is pushing the data to our ServiceNow, right? So here if you see we have multiple connector instance available which we can use to configure connector definitions. Connector definition is nothing but just a script in that we have done the mapping related to the each monitoring source tool attribute to the event table. So basically that enables the mid server to connect to external system to or external server to obtain the event and information using a pull operations, right? So pull basically we are going to pull the data using the mid server capabilities again. So what we need to do, we required a instance or monitoring system IP address and then we require the credentials to access it, right? And then we are able to pull the data if the things are working fine. So in the next slides, I will showcase you or practically will showcase you how you can configure at our side. Then next thing is push. Here, what we need to configure, we need to be configure the external system push event informations to now platform instance via mid server. So here we are providing our MITs. Here we have to be configure the MITs web service event collector extension to push the event to the mid server basically, right? So we will provide our mid server IP and we will going to be provide that event management APIs and the credentials of the ServiceNow systems, and the external system will push the event to ServiceNow. Right, so these two types of pull and push connector out of the box we have available. Apart from that, REST APIs are there, inbound email actions are there to get that event, and that SNMP traps are there, right? So that are different ways to get the event in service now, because to proceed further for event management solutions or automate the event management, we need event should be there in event table, and then we can configure the next things basically, right? So let's move to the next slide. These are the out of the box connector available, right? And I think these are more than 20 connectors available, and where you are able to see and the third party or out of the box connector, basically couple of connectors is third party which is provided by that particular organizations, and couple of connector also available directly on the ServiceNow out of the box store and ServiceNow store as well, right? So and if you see the direction push and pull, I also specifically mentioned what type of connector it is, right? It is a push or pull, right? So we can see that as well. And then event management versus OI operational intelligence, right? So When I'm talking about event management and OI, basically OI means that particular connector have the capability to collect the metric data as well. So not the every connector will able to get that, but every connector is able to get the event directly to the event table. But sometimes if we want to do operational intelligence, or we can say metric intelligence for proactive alert monitoring, then that is that coverage will be available for limited connectors basically, right? So that I all most of the time, if you hear from my side, I'm going to use the Splunk, SolarWinds, JabX, right? PRTZ, HPOM. I think SCOM is also there, right? So there are lots of connectors which is out of the box available, which we can utilize to get the event in ServiceNow table. If I quickly, quickly mention how the pull connectors configured, right? So pull connectors are provided out of the box. You just need to you can create a customized pull connector, and that required a script, connector definition, and connector instance to retrieve event behalf of event source, right? So as I mentioned, out of the box is there, but if we want to create a custom pull connectors, we can that can be also available. And that is the specific, if not able to differentiate from the last slide here, it's that out of the box pull connector available where SCOM, SAP Solution Manager, SolarWinds, vCenter, and PRTG, JABX, and there are a lot which is provided by the ServiceNow. Next thing is push connector. Again, push connector is nothing but external system is pushing the event to ServiceNow, and push connector process the collected event messages and transform them to the required event format, right? So again, there are a lot of push connectors available which we can use to push the event to ServiceNow tables, right? Now, the main thing is the configuration, right? So mid server extension configuration, and this particular mid server extension configuration will work for push connector instances basically. So mid server extension enable the developing REST API to send event and metric to mid server, right? The extension is leveraged by the mid server extension such as metric intelligence, mid web server, event listeners, and the agent client collector WebSocket endpoint extension, right? So it's just a what type of authentication we are going to use here. We just need to provide the name which mid server is going to be execute, or if we have a clusters, we can also go for the clusters as well. So which cluster is going to be serve that particular request, if we are going to be provide the same informations to pushing the event to service now. So that mid server extension which we have to be configured in service now to get the event from the source monitoring tool. The next is I just mentioned about the authentications, what type of authentication you use, and what is the use of the key based authentication, basic authentications, API key, and the MTLS, right? So if you know already, like key based authentication is something when you are going to authenticate, one key will be generated, and based on that authentication will be happening, right? So mid server, if you are selecting the key store or the web server key store, the mid server web server mid web server unified key store is the most efficient option for that. And if you want to enable backward compatibility and the ability to store key pairs in the additional key store, use the web server key stores basically, right? So I just mentioned this one. Then basic is just username and password, which is providing by that monitoring tool to trigger or to get that event in service now, right? Then API key, API number, the maximum number of API key you can create, and on instance is 10. You can configure API key to expire on a specific date, right? So which you can also utilize. And then most is the MTLS based or certificates based authentication, which is more secure. The client must have access a bundle of CA certificates which used to validate server certificates authentication, right? So these are the four types of authentications which we can use, or which you can utilize while you're configuring the mid web server extension, right? So in the next slides or in the next things, we are going to showcase you how you can configure that one, right? The next is how you are going to be configure the pull connectors, or how you're going to be configure the connectors, configure the connector instances basically, right? So I just mentioned that, step by step for each and everything, right? So first of all, you need to be provide a unique name for the connector instance records, such as name of the source and the host as well, if you want to, right? So as I mentioned, that can be possibility for one of the machine, or one of the system can have multiple sources or multiple instances available to trigger the event to service now. Second thing, character definitions is varies to source. Like if you have SolarWinds connector, you are going to be configure the connector instance, you have to be select the connector definition for SolarWinds, and then if you are going to be select for SCOM or PRTG or Ops view, you can select that particular connector definitions on that one, right? The third is, as I mentioned just before that, we required a event source host IP, which system use that IP to collect the event from, or from the monitoring systems using the appropriate mid server, right? So now here the things is come that the connection between my mid server to the target host will be also open. The firewall policies should be required to be open. Then the credentials. So again, that is this particular table which is available here, that is going to utilize the credentials or discovery credentials table only, which you can create the credentials there and you can get the data, right? So these are the four steps which you have to be configured. And collector schedules, second out of the box, it will be 120 seconds, right? It's going to be collect the event in every 120 seconds. Also, if you see here, the authenticates the connector through mid server to the monitoring source and grab most recent 10 events. These event will not be returned to the event table. This happened to the test connection, right? So we have a test connection availability as well, which we can utilize to see or to check the connections are working fine or not. And then if it is working fine, or the credentials and the authentication is good, then we can configure or we can enable this particular connector instance things basically, right? I can see someone raise hand. Yeah. So yes, Abhi, you raise your hand.
Yeah, Jay. So in the last slide regarding the authentication types,
Yes.
yeah. So these authentication types we are mostly discussing for the monitoring sources. Like if suppose I am having monitoring source as Sentinel
Hmm.
or ESCOM gas or SolarWinds. So these authentication types, any of those types we can use for to get those system integrated with our mid server.
Right. So can be vary sometime. Might be that monitoring source is not able to utilize that TLS based certifications or the API keys based certifications, right? But that is the authentication type available in service now. If that monitoring tool able to use that particular authentication type, then yes, we have to discuss with them and follow the things to be configured here, right? So that's possibility there, but most of the time what I see that basics and the TLS based certification, certificate based authentication is going to be used in organizations, right? So and basic, if it is basic with token based authentication is there, right, for security purposes. But it depends again, it varies to monitoring source if it is able to utilize that one or not. And this will be happening in the push, or basically push type of things basically, if that they want to be push the event to service now.
Okay. So in case of ESCOM and SolarWinds, we are using mostly like we are using push or pull. Like
Pull, that we have that have pull.
okay, okay. So that means we have to configure credential whatever we are receiving from ESCOM and SolarWinds.
Right, like this I
Yeah.
just mentioned, host name or the host IP if you have it, then credentials and the connector definitions.
And this credential which we are trying to configure here should be having which kind of access? Like
So it's read only access basically, right? So we are
okay.
just reading that data and pulling here, simple, right? So that will be provided by the customer to get that, that's basically in simple words. If I say that's the database of IP of the SolarWinds
Hmm.
where the going to be stored, right? So we are
Okay.
making a connection from our mid server to the target machine, and the firewall policy should be open in between it, right? And if it is open, then we are going to use the basic credentials and that we are going to be utilized here.
Okay. And Ajay, have you worked on Sentinel also? Sentinel as monitoring source for ServiceNow?
No, no.
Okay.
I never worked it, but I don't think so. There is another challenge, right? So, like it every time, as I mentioned, there are lots of tools available in the market, right?
Hmm.
End of the strategy is the same. Only like we need to understand what Sentinel is monitoring, how we can connect to the ServiceNow event table, how we are able to get the event in ServiceNow, and then other the process will be the same. Writing the event rule analysis of the event tables, event field mapping, and other so things, right? So that will always same out of the box most of the time.
Okay. And Ajay, just one more thing. Like you said yesterday, like we should be having separate mid server for this event management.
Yep.
So do we have any like prerequisite for that mid server? Like what should be the configuration of that mid server and
Um,
what load it can?
I'm coming, but that
Okay.
is a standard mid server, which having the standard configuration, like which we are following for that, discovery side, like installing the same way, configuration is the same only. But once mid server is available in ServiceNow instance, we have to do couple of configuration related to that applications which have been selected for to work as a event management mid server, right? Apart
Okay.
from that, everything is standard. Right now, it depends to you. If you have only one or two mid servers and you are going to be connected with the 20 monitoring tools, then definitely you have to be increase the capacity or that CPU and the memory of the mid server. If you have the two mid server, if you have two integrations only, then I think then 100 GB hard disk or that 16 GB RAM or multi-core CPU is suffice for that, right? It depends use case to use case. So that the thing is we are going to analyze on the first day when we are going to discuss with the customer for implementation things in the preparation side. As I discussed yesterday, we are going to understand like how many tools they have it, how many locations the tools is segregated, right? Or how is there any connectivity available between different data center to another data center, right? If it is there, then it will okay to utilize one mid server. Is not, then we have to be configure the multiple mid servers there to be based on the locations of the region as well, or sometimes based on the monitoring tool as well.
Okay.
But end of
And
the configuration.
okay. And Ajay,
Mm.
the inbound email integration which we are having, so the
Mm.
events can we consider events for that source also, like whatever?
Yeah,
Okay.
basically now what happened basically, we are preparing a format, we are preparing a subject line prepare specific to the events from the monitoring source, and once that event email is triggered from source to service now, that will we are able to see in the inbound emails, right? Then on inbound email table we have to write, we have to write some scripts which we have to be mapped from inbound email body related attribute to the event table, and then we have to be transformed that transpose that particular informations to the event table. So once it is transposed or available in the event table, we can go for the same things again, right? So it depends, like if the tool is legacy tool which we are not able to get any SNMP or the push pull connector or the REST API, then we are okay with that as well, right? End of the day, what we required the information related to automation, right? For and if that is coming from the email, then we can customize that one to be populate in the event table, right? But that inbound email things, I can say sometimes it's limited, basically, because email will be triggering based on any threshold is going to be breached out. But if anything is going to be fixed out at their side, if they are able to trigger that one, I think that will be good for us.
Okay. So in mostly in our case, like we are getting those email alerts whenever any like CPU utilization is high or server is having any outage kind of thing.
Definitely,
So
definitely. That has monitoring tool capability. and
Yes.
almost most of the monitoring tool have that capability, right? So they can trigger the email from their side itself to the stakeholders.
Okay.
Right. That we just need to utilize that they are sending that email to the stakeholders. They can also send that one email to our service now email ID basically.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Ajay.
Yeah. Okay. Now, oh,
So
any
Ajay,
other question?
yeah,
Yeah.
Ajay, do we discuss about the mid server for specifically configured for the event management? What special or different configuration is required?
Yeah. I'm going to be discussing that one, right?
Okay, okay, yeah,
So I just want to, before that, going to that particular part, because again, that is a pre-req. So that, I'm just trying to cover that what out of the box available, you can do that. And then we'll moving out to the mid server. And I'm not going to be install again, not going to be discuss again the installation of the mid server, but yeah, what configuration is required to be act as that particular mid server as a event management mid server, then definitely that particular things we'll discuss.
yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, now let's move to the next things. So that we just discussed this one, how we are going to be configured that setup web server event listener, right? Basically, and that particular web server listener is just to using the which mid web server extension you are going to utilize here, and that it will act as a collect the basically event from using a push method to send the event to service now, right? So that is again we are going to discuss the event listener email listeners which I just mentioned to you, right? So what is the set up an email listener which will process emails sent to ServiceNow and third party monitoring tools. So what we have to enable, we have to be enable the inbound email configurations to receiving the emails. And then you are able to see this one, right? So here inbound email actions which we have to be configured, like name is event email event management and alerts, and then we are going to be targetable and action, what type of actions we are going to be do that, right? So that we can configure, right? So if severity is this, type is this from email, we can write a script to map that particular field from source like from email to the event table basically, right? So as I mentioned, we need a specific email body with couple of informations, and then we need a specific subject line. So based on that we can identify if we have multiple emails receiving from the different monitoring source, so we can identify or segregate it between them, and we can map the correct value to the correct event attribute from the email, right? So that must be required. And then as I mentioned, we required in email body, if I say simply I required a name, host name or the host, right? And we required that metric name, we required type of alert, we required the descriptions, we required the priority and severity of it, right? And that couple of other things which is required necessary to be get that informations to map to the event table, right? If we have as much as informations available there, it can be easily utilized basically. And then we have SNMP trap collector contents, right? So this is particularly and basically going to utilize for that SNMP traps specifically, where you want to get the event using the SNMP listener, right? So we need to be enable this particular SNMP listener at our ServiceNow side. Based on that, our mid server act as an SNMP trap listener, and will, if anyone sending that event to ServiceNow, will sending to that particular IP of the mid server, right? So that again, it's depend on that is that particular tool available, or you have the capacity to sending or utilizing the SNMP trap capability, right? So if it is have, I think SolarWinds have. I integrated with SolarWinds. I integrated with couple of other tools using the SNMP earlier. When I integrated that one, that much the push and pull connectors not available, or using the REST API is another headache to do that, right? So we utilize the SNMP monitoring things or SNMP traps capacity, So what we require to do here, again, we need to be provide our mid server IP to the source monitoring tool. They are going to be configure our mid server IP, and here there are two ports which is going to use is SNM for as an SNMP traps. One is SNMP port 162 with UDP protocol, and another port is 1162 for with UDP protocol, right? So these are the two port only which we can utilize, right? But there is one limitation specifically, right? So if you have multiple instances, right, so you cannot use that you only able to utilize one port 162 or 1162 for that particular instance itself. You cannot utilize the both ports on the same time, right? So we just need little bit be careful as well. And again, if you want to utilize the collect basically what I'm trying to say is a cluster for that particular things, you can also go for that, right? So you can configure the clusters, you can utilize that cluster here while configuring the SNMP trap collectors, and then it will that in that case what you have to do, you have to be enable the firewall policies again from source monitoring systems to mid server on port 62. So here is the small thing which we have to be understand. If it is a pull, means if we are going to pull the data, then mid server to fire source or monitoring system IP should be enabled. But if we are using the push one or we are using the SNMP trap, then my source will be monitoring system and my target will be SNM my mid server. So in that way firewall policy will be open, right? So that we have to be a little careful on it, right? And what role is required to do that, EVT management operator role is required to configure that particular things basically, right? So I think, yeah, that's all for this particular things basically. Now let's move to ServiceNow instance and let's see if the mid server is available here, and we'll discuss practically now for all type of events, sorry, push pull connectors and the mid server listeners and other things basically. Yeah, mid server is available. Let me validate that mid server now. Sometimes it's taking much time as compared to other days. Are you guys also following, facing the slowness issue on your PDIs and that instances?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what, is the service now reduce
Yeah,
some
sir.
side, right? So it's very hectic sometimes to be do that one. Okay, my validation has been started for the mid servers. Okay, it's down. But as I mentioned, there is nothing much required to be configured on the mid server specific for event management. We just need to be configured the supported applications, right? So there are two supported applications basically. One is event management and the second is the metric, right? So if we want to do metric intelligence, so then we require the metric data as well, right? So that we have to be configured as a supported application. And if we are going to utilize for the event management only, then we have to go for that only. So if that mid server is only going to utilize for event management, and that should be the configuration, we should use a mid server for event management purpose only. So we need to be configured that one, and my suggestion is always don't use the event management mid servers for the discovery in the service mapping part, right? Because even you are getting lots of event and high amount of event from the monitoring systems, and then sometimes that is going to be cross for 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs per day, right? That can be possibility. So load is very high that particular time, so don't utilize that mid server for any other operations or any other application specifically. Otherwise, there is high chances to be get that particular mid server down. And if it is mid server down due to event things, definitely it's going to be impact the discovery. And discovery have another challenge as well. While you're in discovery schedule, sometimes mid server is also going to be down due to load at their side, so it will also impact your event management things, right? So keep these particular things separated for event management and this and this discovery and the service mapping side. So now my mid server is up. What I just mentioned to you here, you can go configure. It's always all, but just leave this one. We can say we are going to use this mid server, this, right? So these are the two things. Operational intelligence, we can say metric intelligence again, where if we want to do that, utilize the same mid server for the metric data as well, where the lots of data is coming, and then we can utilize for that particular things, and we can do proactively monitoring for that one, right? So that is there. So that only the things which need to be required to be configured on the mid server side. Apart from that, installation or the prereq for the mid server and other things will be almost same. There is no difference between them. Okay, so that I just want to mention specifically, right? Again, capabilities, here. Right. So capabilities is nothing, as I already mentioned, right? So, but if you want to restrict some of capabilities, right? You don't want to utilize for everything, and you think that your mid server should utilize the REST capability or REST API integrations only, then you can go to manage the capabilities and configure as a REST API. Or if you think that mid server is specifically for agent client collectors, ECCM monitoring, right? So then you can go for agent client collector. Apart from that, I think we don't have an issue to configure with all the capabilities, right? If all capabilities are there, that will be good for us, but it's not, it just to be restrict if something capabilities we want to be restrict only. Okay, so that I'm just putting the all as of now. Next things which we just discussed about push or pull connectors, right? So if I go here, if I type connector, right? So you can see connector definitions, you can see connector instances, these are the push connectors. Let's discuss the first pull connectors basically, right? So if you see, these are the out of the box 32. Right, I think my seat have a little less, but yeah, here you can see 32 connectors definition already available. If I just quickly open one SCOM one, let me open this one. Right, so what they have did, they have just write some script which is Groovy script in the backend, and which is that particular Groovy script and JavaScript is going to be run, and that's particular connector definition by default timing is 120 seconds, and it's a bidirectional. Alert field identifier is a message key here. Based on that, it's going to identify, and there are a couple of connector parameters which they have configured, right? So if we want to be configure a new connector definitions, we can also do that using that reference of it. And if we need know how we can write a Groovy script or the JavaScript, we can utilize further. But end of the day, as I mentioned, nothing here to be like to configure that one. It's just a script basically, and this particular script is just going to utilize for the mapping the mapping the data what we are receiving here. If I'm not able to, okay, I think this is the parent one. Let me showcase you that not this one. Let me open this. Mhm. One moment, I'm just looking to specific things which you know we can correlate here. No, I think I'm not able to find that one. Might be, let's see here, because I'm not expert in the Groovy script basically, right? So I'm just trying to find out. Yeah, I think. Mm, so basically, end of the day, I'm not going with that particular things basically, but yeah, these are the script which is going to utilize end of the day to find out or to map that event which you are receiving here, and based on that, it's going to do that, right? So let me showcase you message key. Mhm, mhm. Hmm. That they are trying to do set event message key, right? So event dot set EMS system, if they are getting that event dot set message key is alert ID basically, and string hostname is find hostname, right? So be what I'm trying to mention here, that is just a specific mapping they have did at their side, and then that particular mapping they are going to utilize to populate my event field, right? So if I go to my event table specifically, if I go to my all event table here, these are the fields. If I open quickly one alert, let me see this one. Right, so these are the fields which is out of the box available on my event table, where we are getting the source, where we are getting the node, we are getting that type of that particular monitoring resource, what type of resource we are monitoring here, then metric, what metric we are monitoring here, specifically the source instance, if it is we have multiple sources are there. So what is the source instance is the message keys again, as I mentioned, we are able to see, we are able to get it as a mess, I can say sysid based format. But if we cannot it, if we don't want to utilize, there are 5 attribute based on that. While we are configuring event rule from conversations from event to an alert, we can utilize the node type, resource, metric name, and there is one more field source, right? So these are the 5 fields which can be utilized as a metric name, and it's not mandatory to utilize all 5 fields, but yeah, we can utilize 3 or 4 in between, right? So we just need to find out the uniqueness of the event for processing for the correlations and the duplicate deduplication rules. Then we are going to utilize that particular 5 fields to configure HMSS key. Then we have severities, then we have resolution states, time of event state is going to be there are 4 states basically, which is once event is landed to the event table, that will be the ready state. Once if it is processed particularly by an event rule, that is processed one, then alert will be generated here. But if it is ignored, an error might be, there are 2 ways to do that. Ignored is based on the event rule. Error if you have not defined the particularly event field mapping for that, right? So that will be there. And then descriptions, this is again you are getting from the source monitoring side, and additional informations you are getting from there. So additional information is something which you can, if you want more information on the event, and that's not possible to coming in these particular fields, and if it is available here, you can write a regex and populate that particular informations to any attribute or any field on the alert table as well, right? And then processing nodes are there, which is showcasing you where the CI is going to be mapped. So event CI type is CMDB app, CMDB APPL now app. What event, what is the internal query they have found, what the found the CI binding with this particular one. If any event rule is applied, you can also see that here, that event rule is up, and if any event rule is applied, right? So make sure whenever you have event, the event rule should be matching, right? So what is happening here in service now, if there is no event rule, there is no event rule configured for that one. So out of the box, there is one schedule job which is running in the backend, that will trigger and convert that out of the using out of the box things to an alert specifically, right? So that should be required. So these particular things which we are looking here, so based on that, that informations is going to be mapped here on the event table basically, right? Using those particular scripts basically. Now, this is the connector definitions out of the box available, but if connector definition is available, then what is the next step we need to do to get the events? We have to be configure the connector instances, right? So if I quickly open this one here, right? So that the name of the connector instance, again, we need to be provide the unique. I can provide like example tech check with AJ. Connector definitions, whatever we just showcase you with the connector definitions, we have to be select the out of the box connector definition from there. If we are going to do solar winds, can use this one. Now if any specific assignment group you want to select here, you can go and select the assignment group from that, group table. Then host IP, again this host IP is the target IP from this basically host IP is the target IP of my uh, monitoring tool where we need to be pull the events, right? So again, it's a database IP of that particular device where they are storing the event basically, right? So we can put that IP here, whatever it is. Let me put this, this, and the credentials, right? So the credentials you can create in the discovery credentials table. Again here you can go and create the basic authentication credentials, and once that is there you can utilize those particular credentials here, right? So if I just quickly use, let me see, okay, now let me save this one. Okay, so as I mentioned, event collection schedule or by default or out of the box is 120 seconds. So in every 120 second, the event scheduler run check on or check on the target machine or monitoring tool to collect the event. And if event is there, new events are there, that will go to insert the events in the event table basically. And this same connector instance you can utilize to get the metric collection as well, right? So as I mentioned, the two things will be happening. One is event and the second is metric data, which is going to be lies in the metric table, right? If you want to collect the metric data as well, because that is continuous one, so you can also enable that metric data as well, or metric collection, right, for that particular source monitoring tool. Second thing here, last connection time or last event collection status, you are able to see here. So whenever you are that particular, this particular connector instance is running, it will update the last time when it runs last time and what is the status of it. If it is error or something there, then you can utilize this particular thing. Sometimes what happens as a live scenario I'm mentioning here, due to some issues, the connector instance is not working properly, right? If it is not working, we can come here and we can see which particular time it's run and what is the error here. So if it is that error message will be also visible here. Let's take an example. And the second, another thing is, these particular connector instance values, right? So these particular connector instance values is out of the box, but if we need to add another connector instance values, we can also add. And like, sometimes the date format and sometimes couple of other things related to that monitoring system, right? So we can also ask that informations to the customer and we can add these particular values here. And then what mid server we are going to utilize, we can select that mid server easily here, right? So just a selection of the mid server only. So if I select this one, that's done, right? So that's it. Now we need to test the connector, right? So if I just test the connector for the testing purpose, that will running and trying to pull the data from that particular machine, but it will run only if my credentials and if my I can say the host IP is correct. And the second thing, the policy between my mid server and my source monitoring tool IP is there. If it is not there, then we cannot able to get it, right? So if you just see simple, what they did, right? So if they are just doing a query on this particular URL, right? So what query they did, this is a query, but basically that here they are trying to grab the 10 events as a testing purpose, right? So that query is filled because the credentials are not correct, as you know, like, I just put it for the testing purpose. Also, the connectivity between the mid servers and the target machine is not there, right? So that we can see if it is working fine, then we are able to see, yeah, it's connected, state is complete, and connection completion code is also completed, right? And we can see that couple of events here, but that event is just for testing purpose. Again, these events are not going to be inserted in the event table basically, right? So if it is done, we can activate this particular connector instance automatically, and once this is activated, every 120 seconds the event will be pulling from the source monitoring team, and then we can come here and identifying based on the source, right? So source is very critical attribute to understand from where the events are generated, right? So from monitoring tool, which monitoring tool the events are generated, and based on that we are putting our correlation rules, we are putting that our event rule and other things basically, right? So that's required. Now so this is about the uh, okay, this is about the connector instance, which is we are going to utilize for the pull. So yeah, I can see raise our hands are raised. So yes, you can ask your question now.
Yeah, so I have this seen that in the pool, pool characters, there is a bidirectional is there option. So what is meaning actually?
Ah,
What does
okay.
what
Bidirectional. Okay, that's nice. Nice catch. So bidirectional is nothing, but if it is a bidirectional, what you are doing here, you are pulling the event from there, like that event is here, and then you are passing the information, just that event we have received, and convert to an alert. It's just a configuration only. If, like, it just bi-directional in simple words. If I say, if you are going to integrate with ServiceNow to ServiceNow, two instances are there, right? So if you are connecting two instances to each other, and if it is bi-directional, if means, like, if any update comes on any incident on X ServiceNow instance, that will replicate to the Y ServiceNow instance, and if anything happening on the Y ServiceNow instance, that can replicate to the A service now, X service now instance, right? So that's the same thing here. It's also applicable in this particular side as well. If you are getting an event and you converted that event to an incident, and if you pass that informations to the source monitoring tool as well, you can do that, because end of the day they also required some visibility, how many event we have triggered, and how many alert and incident is converted for that, right? So that we can utilize if we want to. But I see most of the organizations is not using the bio or directionals, because they want to dependent on, or they want to look on the source monitoring tool, because and that's the reason only. We are always say ServiceNow is a single source of truth, or single view for each and everything, right? So we promoting customer or our stakeholders to use ServiceNow only. So I not did I never did for bidirectional integrations, right? So I don't want to be asked the particular team to be look for SCOM or other tools, right? I ask every team, or whatever integrations we are doing, to come on the service now, and we view the event alert and other things correlation here itself, not on their tool. But if someone wants, we can do that as well.
no? Okay,
Okay.
got it.
Yeah, any other questions from anyone else? Okay, now let's move to the connectors for push. Let me close this. Right, so these are the push connectors which we have available. Push connectors instances, again we have to be configured here, right? So as I mentioned, When we are going to be configure the push connectors, before that we need to be configure the mid web server extension, right? So if I put mid, yeah, this one, right? So we need to be configure this one. Here it's just normal configuration name, short description, which mid web server extension you are going to be utilized here. Here you can also configure the new one, right? So this is all about just we discussed, right? The name, short description, status will be automatic, HTTP port on which you are going to be collect that particular one, and if authentication method, right? So if it is MLS, certificate based, you can provide the key store certificate alias and the trusted password for that. If it is basic, you just need to be use the basic author username and the password for that, right? So that basically you can utilize these particular things basically, right? And the mid server specific, if it is a mid server cluster, you have to be configure the cluster. If it is a mid server specific mid server, you can do that, right? It's just a simple configuration. But what challenges are there when you are doing it, this particular configurations, is the connectivity. So make sure whenever you are going to do pull or push, just understand correctly what you are doing, because what we miss, the opening the firewall policies between source to target. Now it's sometimes it's little confusing what will be the source and what will be the target. So in simple word, if I say, the source will be, if you are pulling the data, your source will be mid server, and the target will be your monitoring source or monitoring system, or the third party monitoring tool which from where you are pulling the data. But if you are using the push connector, in that the source will be your monitoring system and the target will be service now mid server on this specific port, right? So make sure you are going to be do that. So once that is done, you are able to configure this one. You just need to provide the mid server extension, and these particular things will be automatically executing that one, right? And you can see start, stop, and restart activities available on the mid server mid web service event listener as well, right? And the same way you are going to be configure here the name, push connector definitions, you are going to be connect select, and once you are selecting this one, you are able to collect the data from that particular uh, you know uh, using the particular push connectors, right? So there are lots of things, Grafana, Prometheus, Dynatrace, Thousand Eyes, there are a lot tools, Sumo Logic, Catchpoint, right? So you can utilize those particular things here. It's again just a configuration only. So make sure the connectivity and the credentials are correct. And if it is correct, then there is no issue, as such issues you are going to be face it, right? So that is about the push connectors. Then if I go to mid server listener, SNMP trap, mid servers listener. This particular SNMP trap collector context is going to be configured specifically for SNMP trap configurations if you are going to utilize the SNMP trap configuration rights. So what you have to do, again, name, short description here. This is important things, SNMP version V2 or V1 or V2C or V3. So basically, this is basically if you are going to use V3, then you have to provide this one, and then authentication basically happen on that particular way. And make sure when you're using v3, the v3 credentials must be available on the credential table. If you're using this one, there is no authentication you need to be provided, right? So if you see, when I do this one v3 and I'm auth priv, no auth priv or authentication, there's immediately one engine id will be generating, right? So this engine ID we need to share with the monitoring team. I'm going, if they are using V3, SNMP V3 traps, so name, we just need to select this one. We need to check with this what security level they want to be use it, on which port they are going to be sent. As I mentioned, there are two by default port, 162 UDP and 1162 UDP, right? And these both are SNMP traps port. You cannot use any other port apart from these two. So make sure you are going to utilize this one. Second things, as I mentioned, engine ID is generated. So that engine ID and the mid server IP address you need to be share with the particular source monitoring team so they can utilize. And also be careful, if you are going to use the mid server cluster, then you have to be select the cluster here, which cluster you have created. But in that case, you have to be provide the both mid server IP to the monitoring tool. It doesn't means like if you are going to use a mid server cluster, two mid server are there, the different IPs are there, but you are only sharing the one IP. That silly mistakes we did lots of time, right? So little bit careful. If you have to do you're going to use a mid server cluster, which is going to be execute your SNMP traps. If anyone is down immediately due to an XYZ reason, automatically another will take the this that particular road. Again, when you are going to be configure, if you remember, there are two things will be there: the failover, and the second thing is load balance, which you can also utilize here. If you want to do failover, you can do that as well. If you want to do load balance, you can also do that as well, right? So same way, if SNMP traps is sending event to mid server, the first event comes to first mid server and a second mid server comes to second mid server if you are utilizing the load balance one. And if it is failover, then you know like how that will be working, right? But make sure that engine ID you are going to be pass or share the correct engine ID to them. And you are using the correct, you are going to be check the minimum security level with that, right? And again, you can utilize the credentials, which credentials you are going to be utilized, right? So you can create one SNMP v3 credentials, and you have to be configure that credentials here. Here also some related links related to the start, stop, restart, which you can utilize. And you can see here the status and executing on. So which mid server is executing this particular transactions, you are also available, or this particular information is here to you can visualize and see that particular things, right? So these are the primary three things for which you have to be configure related to getting event through push, pull, or SNMP traps, which is most of the time going to utilize in organizations to connecting with third party monitoring tool. Now, yeah, I can see again hand raise. So yes,
Yeah, Jay. So basically, which monitoring tool is sending this SNMP trap in
lots of
general?
monitoring tool. Yeah, SolarWinds is also available, and some storage tool, HP3 Power, and others. There are lots of tools are available in the market.
Okay, so this security level is decided by them, or it will be decided by us?
No, so, that security level that can be decided by them only, right? So if what, because end of the day, what that particular monitoring tool is supported, right? That based on that we are going to use this one. And yeah, one more thing I especially mentioned: if we are passing this engine ID to them, they will also generate one engine ID from their side. So we need to replace that engine ID with their ID, right? So means it exchange of the engine ID between monitoring tool to our system, right? So this 7D ID we are going to be passed to them, and whatever the ID they are generating at their side, that we have to be map here, right? So we need to replace this one, and we need to be provide the whatever ID they are providing to us, right? So this is just important thing I missed it, right? Then we that particular thing we have to utilize. Yeah, any other questions? Sorry.
Yeah, just like is there any recommended way, like when we can use the pool connector, when we can use the push connector?
If you ask me what is the recommended way, sorry. If you ask me for a recommended connector, sorry, recommended way to integrate, right? That is in my way is using or utilizing the out of the box push and pull connectors, right? But again, that depends on the situation and the scenario on the monitoring tool. If we don't have out of the box push and pull connectors, then we can go for SNMP traps as well, or we can go for the REST API integration, right? Both are the good way. Only in the last situation, if nothing is possible, then we have to go for inbound emails. Otherwise, we'll try to avoid as much as possible inbound emails because I see lots of issues with that, right? So just try to utilize the SNMP traps and whatever I just mentioned, the REST API. If connectors is not available, if connectors is available, the first priority is to utilize the connectors. Now, one thing I just want to mention here, whenever you are going to integrate with SNMP traps, right? So when once you receive the event here in event table, so you are able to see the source like EM self monitoring, right? But in that case, if you are integrated with event through SNMP trap, the source will be trap enterprise from double one something, like if I just give an example here, trap enterprise from 11307, if I'm remembering correct. No, okay, one moment. Allow 1130 MIB OID4 SNMP traps. SNMP trap of solar winds. I'm not reminding correctly, but yeah, there is, basically what I just mentioned to you, uh, like that you are receiving that source. So sometimes it's very confusing, right? We are not able to identify what does that mean, 11307 or the 111 or something different, right? So it's very simple here again. You can come here in this particular internet and just find out using this particular one trap this. If it is 111, I'm just not recalling the correct name of it, but SolarWinds have that specific OID that is 11307 or something, and the same way Oracle have the specific OID, and the each tool which is capable to send the SNMP trap that have a unique OID which you can find out here, and you can understand if you are doing multiple integration or multiple SNMP traps integrations to get the event, you can understand based on the OIDs what it belongs to. Okay, I think that I just want to trap stream. Let me find out something, right? So I will let you know on this particular part, right? So trap enterprise from double. I'm just recalling this one only. 11307. I think it's SolarWinds. I can see this one. Okay, yeah. Any other questions in that particular topics which we have covered just now till now? Anyone? Any questions? Anything?
I am good at that.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, 11307 is only right. Okay, so what I just mentioned here, na, that 11307 is the correct one, right? So you will receive that this type trap enterprise from 11307. So it's a SolarWinds. If something else 111 or 10 or 0 or whatever, right? You can come here on the internet and search trap from enterprise that OID, and you are able to find out the source, exact source of it, right? And here, if I quickly showcase you, I can see no. Mhm. And in event basically, for when you're using SNMP, the data comes in OID format, right? Like the same way when we are using the discovery, our discovery data is available in the OIDs. Here the data also comes in the OID format, and that is going to be mapped with this particular event table, right? So that and that sometimes it's very limited data, right? So try to utilize that one, or you can also configure your specific format which you can send to the that source monitoring team. So they can also trigger or they can add that particular OIDs while sending the data to you. Right? If you feel that data, like, matter name is not there or resource is not there, you can ask that informations to them and they can add at their side to send that informations through the OID while you are doing the SNMP trap configuration. Okay, I think, yeah, that's all for today. If any questions, anything, you can raise your hand. Otherwise, we are good for today. We'll continue tomorrow to see the events, how the events are landed, what informations are there, and then we'll proceed further for different things. Okay, then sounds good, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good day. We'll connect tomorrow at the same time and we'll proceed further.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Ajay.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Bye-bye.